In May, I was set to return to one of the UK's most iconic Middle-earth events. And this year, I won't be going alone. We deposited the dog with my friend Liv, but we picked up Graham in exchange. Graham will be playing with my other friend Hayden, and we'll get into their absurd list in due course. This is the story of a tournament that is obsessed with fluff, theme, and fun. It prides itself on not caring who wins games, and yet somehow it still ended up like this. Welcome then to Battle Camper and 7 Stones 2023. 7 Stones is a 400 points per player doubles event. Chris and I were taking a combined force of Khazad-dûm and Lothlórien, except it was representing the First Age alliance between the Elven Kingdom of Doriath and the Dwarven Kingdom of Nauglador. More accurately, I should say it represents the sundering of that alliance. Now, I can't speak very well to the lore, which is why JMac from Armies of Middle-earth very kindly did a full lore video for me, although the title and thumbnail were much less kind.
He made a complete arse of the lore because he is an absolute melt.
I do recommend you watch it. I can't stress enough that the lore for this army would just be a complete mess if it weren't for him. Otherwise, here's my short version. They were friends, some shady hijinks went down, they weren't friends. I converted Thingol, King of Doriath, from Orofin, and he would be using Celeborn's rules. Chris is using Durin as Nauglador, who is King of Nogrod, and whose name I will not be able to remember. Otherwise, Chris had a captain and a mix of regular warriors and Khazad guard. I had Rumil for some reason, then Galadrim warriors, and 4 court guard. To represent the initial alliance but growing animosity and mistrust between the two factions at the start of every game will be green allies, but we roll a d6 at the beginning of every turn, and if we roll a 1, we go from green to yellow, and if we get a 1 again, it's going to go from yellow to red. Whew, there we go, we front-loaded a whole bunch of the admin so we'd have to deal with that again later. Now it was just time for 2 men in their 30s to get into their homemade elf and dwarf costumes on a busy public road in front of a university, and we were ready to go. So right before game 1, just to remind you that every miniature of mine that we use here on the channel is assigned to one of my patrons. This way we can track who's lucky, who's unlucky, and reward great deeds. Any new miniatures to this force have been assigned just before we came to the tournament. So patrons, if you want to drop your paintbrushes for a second and look at the screen, you'll see 3 pictures with who has what miniature. They're also in a Dropbox link in the description, and they're in the Discord. So you can observe your own repeated deaths in real time. Obviously no one gets the dwarves because they're Chris's miniatures and not mine. That's obviously a shame given how excellent they looked. I will also just say thank you so much to Chris for actually coming and painting up this army just for this event. This is Chris's first ever MESBG tournament, so I was hoping he was going to have fun. I lived with Chris during my formative hobby years, and he taught me to build, paint, and play. So as the tournament was about to start, I kind of felt like I owed him one.
Best of luck, and welcome to 7 Stones.
For our first game, we'd be playing Callum and Katrina Farbrother. The game was Reconnoiter, where you try and get as many models as possible off the opponent's board edge. The Farbrothers had brought a menagerie of Middle-earth, representing as many different animals as they could possibly squeeze into one list. This included Thranduil on elk. It included Radagast and, more importantly, Sebastian the Hedgehog on rabbit-drawn sleigh, the delightfully named Rocket Sausage, which is Dane on his pig, a Rider of the Dead with his skeletal steed, Farmer Maggot and his hounds, a Great Eagle, Banderbrass Took, and Bill the Pony. Now keep in mind that in the first game, just like last year, every table has got a marble glued to a base on it. Now, rather than being conveniently in the middle of the board, on this game our marble is up that tower, so actually just out of camera shot at the moment. Chris and I huddled before the game had even started and decided that, rather than winning, the marble was our primary priority. If we capture it, it will give us 1 automatic free priority in every subsequent game in which we hold it. Plus, if we make it to the end of the weekend and it's still in our possession, we get to take it home. Whilst all of our warbands came on turn 1, the menagerie weren't having much luck. First few rolls all ended in failure.
And we've got 2 warbands left. Okay. The Bill and Horse are on. Hooray! And then the Spectral Steed is also not on.
This allowed us to steal a turn's movement. We used it to get toward the crossroads at the centre of the board, hoping we can block up some of those alleyways and secure ourselves the only staircase up to the Palantir. But even with the speedy elves and the dwarves, who are natural sprinters after all, we could not beat Bill the Pony or Banderbrass Took to the centre of the board. It seems that they decided they would play the objective for some reason, and I made Bill and Banderbrass dash for our side of the board. I approve of any plan that makes Bill the linchpin.
Go, go, Bill! Escape! And then Banderbrass will f*** you up next time.
They then found a way of putting a real thorn in our dash for the top of the tower plan.
The eagle is going to go roost up here.
It seemed our early game deployment advantage hadn't yielded much result.
Okay, I think now we're all on the board.
And on entering the main square, Radagast the Brown cast Terrifying Aura.
Yes, it's cast. He's now terrifying. Sebastian is a pretty scary hedgehog.
After a lot of early game posturing, we felt that this was the first turn things might actually go down. It was therefore unfortunate that we lost priority, but fortunate that we called a move and won the move off. We formed up the new line from the stairs across the square. We took this opportunity to charge the now immobilised Rocket Sausage, who was trying to sneak through that narrow alleyway there. We weren't able to catch the fleeing Bill the Pony or his bodyguard Banderbrass Took, but then we were focusing the Palantir in any event. As all this was happening, I was starting to regain my cough I thought I'd shaken earlier in the week, and I got nothing but sympathy from our opponents.
It's all just a big distraction technique, isn't it? Just leave the poor man alone.
It was then time for their priority move, and they had a sneaky ploy in mind to climb the tower and grab the Palantir.
Yeah, I'm gonna send Daisy, the puppy, climbing, leaping up the wall.
Sick, okay.
No!
What? No!
Daisy just headbutts the wall.
So the first of Maggot's hounds had failed to climb the wall, but there were more where that one came from, and soon enough, they'd managed it.
So Wolf has managed to run up the wall.
With the dog's acrobatics out the way, it was time to move on to Radagast and his spells.
We are just going to actually cast and immobilise on whoever he's called, not Dane.
Yeah, Nauglador. Yes, yeah. Not
Cast on a 6.
very nice.
That was a big loss for us. The Nauglarino is this army's beat stick. Radagast had consigned him to the sidelines for this turn. With the rest of their moves, Sebastian and Radagast made a gutsy charge, Banderbrass Took made an even gutsier charge, and Thranduil and the Ghost Steed simply moved up into the square.
We are done. That is all of our moves. Shooting.
Shooting. I don't think I've got any.
We don't have any. Yeah, no shooting for us.
Cool. So we're into fighting.
I am going to call a heroic combat with Sebastian.
Okay. On our side.
Okay, Sebastian has 1 attack. The sleigh, he gets 1 extra for charging, and the sleigh has 4.
Okay, we're shielding, I think. So yeah, so somehow I think not ideal. We've got the banner.
6.
6, so you've got it anyway.
So with that, the heroic combat went off, and Sebastian and his sleigh charged over to Banderbrass Took to help him out. Despite that going off, Sebastian managed only a single additional kill with his heroic combat. Next, it was time for Banderbrass Took versus 2 Khazad Guard.
So I've just got 2 on my 1 for charging. I get 6.
Banner.
Yes!
It flashed up. That's 1.
Kills 1. I'll kill the one nearest the house. Rocket Sausage.
I'm going to shield with both the pikes. I'm on 5, so I've got a banner. 4, so I've got it.
That's a big relief. Dane is an absolute beast, and so I was glad that Johnny Derbyshire and James Russell's guard could keep him at bay. Having shielded though, they don't get to make strikes.
We're on to priority then.
We are indeed.
Does our alliance degrade? No.
Still friends.
Still friends-ish.
So priority, we get a 6.
6. We take it on a 6 because we did it last time. And now that's a 1. Cool. We're going to call with the Captain-y bloke.
The elk is going to call a heroic move as well.
Right then. Your priority.
Goes to the elk.
So first, Thranduil's elk moved up. He used its amulet special item to cast both Nature's Wrath and Terrifying Aura. This knocked 5 dwarves and 2 elves down to the ground. He then finished his charge at the far end of the line, up by the house. Radagast then immobilised Durin on a 4+, and this time we very much wanted to resist it.
Let's get him actually moving. Yeah, got it on a 5.
He is resisted, that is fine.
Radagast then also just touched 2 warriors in the line, although he had to do it backwards because otherwise the rabbits would get in the way. The ghost horse then finished the line, and a dog brought up the rear. Now it was our turn, and we really wanted Thingol to immobilise Thranduil's elk. I know how much damage it can do, and we'd quite like him dead this turn.
You know what, Thingol might as well come in.
Right, keep on there. We're ready to...
We're going to cast on a single die, immobilise on Thranduil.
On the elk, go on then.
Off on a 5.
They decided to roll all 3 of his will to try and resist it, given this was our last power anyway.
See how it goes. Yes! I mean, oh.
The elk will might it.
So my celebration was perhaps premature. They spent a might to resist it, but at least that had got a might off the table. In the moves that followed, we finally gave up on the Palantir. The dogs were rapidly climbing the tower, and the eagle was still playing guard at the top of the stairs. Therefore, Rumil, who was halfway up the stairs, and a couple of elves circled around the back of the tower to see if we could clinch an actual victory. Meanwhile, a few elves that had been a part of our heroic move just remained in place as reserves to see what the bird would do and see what the rocket sausage would do and respond to events as they developed. Other than that, everyone was tied up trying to bring these beasts to heel.
So we're just going to turn him around. So we're into combat.
Yes.
Any heroics from you guys?
After some deliberation, Thingol and the elk both called strikes. But that combat would have to wait for later.
So, I might do the Rider of the Dead first.
Yeah, excuse me.
Damn it!
Oh, boo!
I'm going to do the Spectral Steed first.
That's better.
Every time you misname, I'm taking off victory points.
Yeah.
The Spectral Steed won the fight, but thankfully only managed to kill one of the dwarves.
Yeah,
Dane?
rocket sausage.
Rocket sausage. I'm going to shield with both again. 6s.
I was feeling pleased with myself until Dane got a 6 as well, and it went to a roll-off.
Take it. 4x6, you take it.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, you.
The animals took it, and killing on 4s, they dispatched one of my guard at the Khazad-dûm court. Banderbrass also won his combat, although failed to kill anything. It was then time for Sebastian's sleigh, smashing into the dwarven lines.
I did charge, so I got 4 for the sleigh, 1 for charging, and then Sebastian.
6s. Good.
6 as well. I get the
You've
6s.
got one.
Oh, Sebastian.
Amusingly, Sebastian the Hedgehog actually gets an attack at strength 1, which means he'll need 6s by 5s to get a kill.
Go on. He's got his first 6. This is a heroic act moment.
Go, Sebastian.
There we go, an ancient and noble dwarf warrior was killed by a hedgehog, and we were on to the Thingol Thranduil strike-off.
My strike takes me up to 9.
They sadly managed to clinch it by getting up to fight 10.
No 6s, and you're out of might. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 dice in there. We've got the 6.
Yeah.
So we took the fight. You're trapped.
A big relief. For the want of 1/6, Thranduil was dispatched. This was the high point for us in this game. We ended up failing to get a single model off the board. On the far side, the eagle we'd so far ignored dived down to block the street and prevent our escape. Dane refused to be injured, let alone killed, blocking up that alleyway for the entire game alone. Radagast sledged back over and used his massive base to stop reinforcements from getting through. And with their 8-inch move, Farmer Maggot's dogs tied up Rumil and his prospective escapees. Meanwhile, they got a single model off, Bill the Pony, and there's no shame losing to Bill. Next was one of my favourite bits of any tournament, but particularly Seven Stones, which is looking over all the armies and display boards. This was Jay and Tony's display for the dead in the caverns beneath the Dwimorberg. I just love the lighting emanating from behind the hand-carved windows and doors into the mountain. I just love the lengths that people go to in this event, and I don't think it's an easy thing to get people to do. I think it's a consequence of a very carefully cultivated ethos around the event that people just buy into heavily. It's worth mentioning that I don't think people would go to these lengths if the tournament was crap. So if the table's terrain were crap, if the venue was crap, if the prizes were crap, if people didn't feel the passion coming from the TOs, then they wouldn't give it back. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but you struggle enough to get me out of bed in the morning, let alone build something. So, as we finish on this absolute masterpiece of the Gates of Moria. Gates, by the way, that open and close, and that have actual halls behind them. Let's have a look at how our board came together. Oh, and by the way, if you're thinking, hang on, he hasn't shown mine, and mine was really good. There were so many really awesome ones. They didn't all fit in this video, but I'm going to be showing off more in the part 2 of this video. Anyway, This was my second ever attempt at a board build. My first was absolutely catastrophic and ended up in the actual bin. So one Friday I went out and bought classic wall insulation foam, chopped it down to size, and planned my layout. I carved cliff shapes into 2 sides, made rocks in rock molds and stairs with a pencil, classic crinkly tinfoil rock texture, scored the wood bottom for better PVA adhesion, weighed it down with every book I could find and an IKEA toolbox, made hobby compound to just seal everything up and make it firm and sturdy, painted up my 3D print throne and gazebo and GW trees, carved into the board to hide the tree bases, used hobby compound to seal in their feet forever like some horrific form of dystopian capital punishment, painted the ground brown and the cliffs grey, dried it outside before bathing it in wash, slopped PVA for flock and then did the flock, affixed my beautiful 3D prints, made resin and white paint ice sheets for later, then felt confident enough to do the river resin pour live on stream.
I can hear you. Oh, you can hear me, okay.
Oh no! The resin's going through! I misjudged! I misjudged the volume of resin! I need to soak it up, it's gonna ruin everything! Oh shit! Oh no! It's gone everywhere! I misjudged the resin! It's fucked me! It's fucked me! No, please! Please don't do this to me, please! Then I had my detail flock and my snow creamy stuff, did a whole bunch of sealing like the professionals, added the powder snow flock for the lighter stuff, more sealing, obviously, used Clearfix gel to shape the waves, thanks Sean for the hint, dry brushed the white back on for the wave tops, and fixed the waterfall in place and I was about done. I have to say, I adored this hobby project. It's the first time I've done anything like this. It was like playing with Lego, you just throw things together and see what comes out. It was also just extremely relaxing, except the resin pour, obviously. I could just sit up late for a few nights, binging Succession and making my build. The only thing I didn't like about this whole themey thing was shaving my beard. Anyway, wouldn't you believe it, after all that, we're actually on to game 2. I'll be playing Jay and Tony. Theirs was the fantastic Dead of Dunharrow board with the green lighting. They took Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, the King of the Dead, a bunch of Warriors of the Dead, and some Riders of the Dead. The game was Total Conquest, one of the doubles scenarios from the matched play guide. It uses Maelstrom deployment type, save for 1 warband from each side, which is going to deploy within 6 inches of the centre. For them, that was the 3 hunters. For us, it was Thingol. We used Jay and Tony's excellent mummified corpse objective markers, which you can see here on screen. Our hope was that Thingol and some cheeky immobilizers could keep Aragorn out of action long enough to bring him down before the ghosts arrived. We took the first turn's priority, but they used Aragorn's 3 points of might to call a move, and we decided not to counter it this early in the game. Our heroes were well protected, we'd still be able to use magic, and there weren't any charge bonuses we either needed to activate or deactivate. Seeing as how there are only 3 hunters, it was a nice simple heroic move. They locked up the front line of elves and used Legolas as a blocker to try and stop anyone from getting around the back of them. In our move, we tried to get as many traps as we could, and Thingol would use his first cheeky immobilize.
We're going to throw 2 will at an immobilize on Aragorn. Come on! A 6.
I'm going to throw 2 dice here.
No. So immobilized. That's our move. We can now roll for the other warband, see if they come on. Yep, Rumil's warband. A 4.
Rumil's warband appeared on the south of the board, ready to support against Aragorn and his hunters. The Nauglador unfortunately arrived in the east of the board, quite a long way from any of the fighting. Finally, the dwarf captain also arrived in the south and seized on that objective. So all in all, we certainly couldn't complain about our deployments. We had a pretty cohesive line on this side of the board. Unfortunately for the ghosties, we got to choose where the King of the Dead went down, and of course we put him in the most inconvenient place we possibly could.
So yeah, basically as far as possible over that side.
Hopefully they'd have better luck with the final warband.
Same again, let's just plug them up over there. Same place, I'm afraid, guys.
With that resolved, we were on to the fighting.
We'll strike with Thingol. Let's start with Legolas, that's nice and easy. My brown dice is -1 for 2-handed. Oh, that's down to the 4, oh, we got it.
They thought they might spend a might to win it, but I rolled a banner and got up to a natural 5. They still decided to spend, but it cost 2 of Legolas's 3 might. Sadly, however, even after that investment, they didn't actually manage to kill anything.
Let's do Gimli next. We've got 3 here. Again, brown is 2-handing. So I'm on 6s, so you need a 6. You get 1! I've got Elven-made weapon, so 3+, I've got it.
You got priority.
Oh! No, it's theirs!
Choppy, choppy, chop.
Once again, though,
No!
there was sadly no choppy, choppy, chop. It was then time for the big one, Thingol v Aragorn. Thingol struck, so he's going to be winning on fight in any event.
That's only a 4 high. I've got the banner and the 3 spears.
They only got a 4. We remained on 5s even after a banner and Lord of the West rerolls.
Yeah.
So you're spending 2 might to get to 6. We'll spend 1 to get to 6. So Thingol's rolls not good. And these 3 spears 2. Oh, Lord of the West. So 3.
After all the saves, Aragorn was left with 2 wounds, 1 might, 1 will, and 1 fate. We were then on to priority for just turn 2, and they took it. We called no heroics, and they went first. They were a bit smug about Aragorn's chances of getting even with Thingol this turn.
Yeah, but you can't cast magic if I charge you.
The dice decided to punish them for their hubris in the following terror check.
Yeah, she does, yeah.
They spent Aragorn's free might this turn to just make the charge. Extremely unlucky. But you know, it's a hard lesson to learn, but we've all got to learn it. Dice are arseholes. Anyway, after this, the honking great tide of death rolled in from the east, bearing down on my elves. The dead had used March to rush to help the 3 hunters, which was a pretty good idea, and we probably should have done as well, as the Dwarves and Rúmil's warband attempt to relieve Thingol. Instead, we sent 3 elves off alone to try and hold the line for as long as they possibly could.
We are going to strike with Aragorn though.
Strike with Aragorn. And it's your priority. You want to do first, boss?
Close my eyes and hope it all goes away. Let's do Gimli first.
So 3 for me. 1 a 6, so you need a 6. No.
They spent the might and it came down to another roll-off.
That's us.
With their strikes to kill both a court guard and a Galadhrim warrior with shield. This is something they'd not expected to be able to do.
Do you think Gimli can kill 2 elves?
No, not with our rolling. No. Genuinely no.
That was so emphatic.
All morning. There's no chance.
Why didn't we combat? Would you like to do Legolas?
Yeah, go on then.
Go on.
Against Legolas, I only managed a 4. Still, apparently that was better than they could manage. I did 1 wound, but Legolas saved it on fate.
And now we've got no choice. It's the Aragorn fight. Strikes first. No! We're up to...
Yes, we needed that! Finally!
So see if you get your 6. Nah, double 6. Very good.
This is a problem. Thingol is our leader day 1 and they're wounding on 4s.
Okay, it's work VP.
That's 3 wounds. So I've got to pass at least 1 fate. Pass 2. No fate, 1 wound down.
We were back to priority and this time we took it. They called a move with Aragorn's 3 point of might, hoping to lock Thingol up and get him deaded this turn. To try and save him, we called with Rúmil. Chris prudently called a march with the Nauglasaurus to try and get his dwarves to contribute before the game ended. So it went to a roll-off and we take it on a 4+.
6 good. No! You haven't had a single rock in your way.
So there would be no magic this phase, but what there was a mad dash for the centre of the table. The 3 hunters locked in some key targets and the rest of the elves clumped up around them. Our 3 sacrificial elves headed to the opposite bank of the river to do their very best to lock in as many of the ghosts as possible. A few of Rúmil's elves were then able to come up behind the brawl in the middle to create a second line of defence to catch any who slipped through. Turns out, quite a few slipped through. The simple fact of the matter was the elves would not be able to last long against the ghosts, and if they broke through, they'd bunker up on the central objective. I was feeling like it all came down to whether or not the dwarves could get here soon enough to reinforce. Aragorn struck, and Thingol was out of might to counter. All I reasonably could do was call a defence with Rúmil, who was now in combat with Gimli. Legolas then called a heroic combat, and so he went first.
So Legolas is fight 6.
We're 5s here, so you win on a 6. A 3 high. I've got a banner, so...
It's an important one.
On a 5. Yes!
We did a wound, which Legolas saved on fate, but it took him both points to do it. Now, of the 3 sacrificial elves that were sent to hold the line, 2 lost their combats, 1 lost their life, but this one by the riverbank won against a knight and 2 warriors of the dead. There's still a wave of the dead bearing down on him, but that alone has bought us a bit of breathing room. This guard of the court is assigned to Alan Cameron, and it's one to keep an eye on. The dead second knight had more luck knocking my warriors back and down, and they were getting dangerously close to being able to swamp that central objective. An hour into this game, I was very excited about Chris actually joining the combat.
Okay, now let's do Gimli v Rumil. 6s. 5. So 2 strikes, nothing.
So we came to Aragorn v Thingol again. Aragorn had the fight, so he just needed a 6. A big fluff. With so many minis against a trapped Aragorn, he was finally dispatched. Remember, that's not just a big hero gone, but however many turns are left in the game, that's how many points of might we just took off the table. With Aragorn dead, we could afford to commit more elves to the defensive line. The dwarves would finally be here in earnest next turn, so we just needed to buy ourselves that little bit of extra time so they could bunker up on the objective. Like a true champion, Alan Cameron's elf stood in the way and tried to hold back the tide. Just getting in the way, like a cat. The first combat to go is the only elf to actually make it to the other side of the river and survive. He was trapped against 4 warriors. He'd lost his combat last turn but had survived against the odds and was now holding up another good chunk of the ghosty force. This one belongs to Johnny Derbyshire. Let's see if he can buy us another turn of safety.
Only a 4. 6.
3 each.
You've got it.
Alright, he lost, but will he survive again?
5s. No.
Not yet.
And again. No.
No.
5.
Oh, don't roll those dice. They've betrayed you. They go to dice prison.
They come from the bad place.
There you go.
He's just another talentless scrab after all. Alan Cameron's elf also fluffed it. It shielded but got 2 1s and then a further 1 on a reroll. He was fighting against the King of the Dead, so I guess we'll cut him a bit of slack. There were only 3 casualties in this combat phase, 2 of which were for the elves.
Sliced indeed.
Then it was time for Thingol's combat against Gimli. They'd only got a 5. He was assisted by one of Chris's Khazad guard.
Thingol, 5, and random elf. Oh, sorry, I've got 2 supports there. Pikes. Oh, there you go. And Lord of the West. And Banner. No! How have you done that like 17
I like the fact that your first roll of the game in combat was a 2.
Yes.
Please carry that on. You do really remind me of your brother, I'm not going to lie.
That's right, Chris's first roll of the game was only 20 minutes before it ended. To add insult to injury, I'm fast forwarding through the rest of the game because it's basically now been decided. You can see on screen that by arriving when they did, the dwarves were able to bunker up on the central objective. The elves then just held a perimeter, and whilst they were certainly losing the war of attrition with the ghosts, it wasn't quickly enough for the dead to break through and actually challenge the dwarves for the objective that would decide the game. We each held 2 objectives. As you can see, 1 ghost has been sent rushing off to the northwest side to grab theirs. This meant it was decided by the central objective and the fact that we killed their leader but they didn't kill ours. So I'm very sorry, Chris, I brought you to your first MESBG tournament to try and chill you a good time, and you basically had to sit this one out. Still, we both thought Jay and Tony were fantastic opponents, really great fun to play, and they probably would have won it if they'd remembered that their ghosts could cross deep water. Also, I do have to note that in his last fight, Rumil shielded and got a 666. It's going to become important later. Now we have to catch up briefly with Graham and Hayden at this point. In the spirit of Seven Stones, they brought a very finely crafted list. Graham fondly referred to it as Groblog's Company. Groblog's Company is led by, well, Groblog. In his warband is the Balrog. There is then the Barad-dûr list, which is just Sauron. But then they also got a free orc, which I understand is called Broglob. The free orc was gifted by the TOs so they could enter it into the Arena of Champions later, which sounds really nice until you realise just how much easier it makes it to break them. Anyway, Chris and I have been desperate to play against Sauron, the Balrog, Groblog and Broglob. So we needed to either both win or both lose our last games to end up in the same contest tomorrow. We'd be getting that win or loss against Kalman and Alex. They'd actually brought a really interestingly themed list. The theme was everything I hate most in MESBG. I'm not bitter. We had the Necromancer, the Dol Guldur Witch King, the Dungeon Keeper, Spider Queen and a whole buttload of spiders. The game was Fog of War, where you choose a non-leader hero of theirs to kill, a non-leader hero of yours to protect, and a piece of terrain to hold at the end of the game. You do all of this in secret. We chose the Spider Queen as our target, figuring they'd really want to get stuck in. We didn't really fancy the Dungeon Master, and we definitely didn't fancy the terror-causing, death-defying, 6-inch teleporting Witch King. We chose to protect Rumil and capture that big old piece of terrain which we felt we could just flood with warriors.
Oh, does our alliance degrade?
Does our alliance degrade?
Please no. Oh, thank God. I need that resistance to magic.
We took the first turn's priority and we just moved up. We tried to create 2 lines in which the strong, tanky dwarves were at the front and the elves with their pikes and their spears were supporting at the back. As quick as possible, we wanted to be able to stop the necromancer from throwing spells and stop the spiders from throwing webs. Hopefully our burly, two-handed weapon-wielding strength 4 dwarves backed up by fight 6 and fight 5 elven pikes and spears can get the job done. Although I was getting a little concerned when they whapped out these sort of magnetic inch marker things, which just seemed very professional to me. The necromancer popped out of his hovel to cast Compel against Rumil on 3 dice. I tried to resist with my free resistant to magic dice.
Not likely.
I decided I didn't want Rumil to die turn 1, unusually, and so I mited that up to a 6. In their move, they simply ambled forward, making sure to keep 6 inches away from everyone in all directions. To make the situation even more intimidating, the Spider Queen dropped some broodlings. She does this by spending a point of will to summon smaller, even more disgusting spiders. I didn't hold out much hope for shooting, but I had to try and chip a few wounds off these spiders.
Right, so I'm hitting on 3s because I didn't move. That's 3 hits. If I can get those 6 again, that'd be lovely. Wounding on 4s because you're D3. That's 3 wounds. And a wound, yeah.
Give us a wound band. Which one?
That was the best shooting I've ever done in this game. That was like a cannon. It's going to be from now on.
They took priority next turn and promptly chill-souled a dwarf with their necromancer. Other than that, they didn't really do anything. They brought the necromancer back into safety, sent 2 little spider broodlings up the right-hand side, and then just sat there waiting for us to come to them. We were happy to oblige. We wanted to get in close and hit things. We therefore surged up the centre and also started scrambling into the ruins on the left-hand side, looking to bring the necromancer to justice. In their turn, they paralysed 2 front-rank elves. In return, only one of my sniper elves could see, but with 1 arrow, it finished off another spider. They now took the Palantir they'd kept from the first game and used it to get an automatic priority win.
Let's see, I think we'll get that. Literally this whole bubble. Right, we'll call Rumil.
Yeah, we'll use the might. So Spider Queen's going to call heroic. Thank you.
So we took it and used our heroic to tag up any spiders we could reach. It would have been nice for Thingol to try and immobilise the Spider Queen, but unfortunately he was too far away for that by now. Instead, he and his little splinter band were invading the Necromancer's fortress. We didn't have the move to tag the Spider Queen, which is unfortunate because she's got monstrous charge, and in she charged. The little spiders on the right-hand side made a beeline for my archers. The Necromancer then again attempted to chill soul my banner bearer this time on a 5. I'd need my own 5 to resist it.
Hey! Sorry, I should have been less gloaty there. Oh, you suck it! You suck it!
We then finished up our priority move, venturing deeper and deeper into the Necromancer's ruined fortress, and finally engaging the spiders right along the line. Shooting was a big load of nothing on both sides, and so we were into the fights. The Spider Queen went first, winning her fight and electing to hurl an elf unceremoniously right down the line, through every single other fight going. The thrown elf was killed, then we had to roll a hit on every model in every combat that was hit. Here's my 2-second synopsis.
No.
Yes.
No. No. No.
There we are, 1 dwarf and 1 elf dead, and the spiders managing to avoid any damage at all. In the rest of the combats, we won all but 1, but nothing died in either direction. We were then back to priority, and Side Evil had another trick up their sleeve. Well, actually, it was the same trick as before, but again.
We're going to use the sacking Palantir now.
There you go, with a second Palantir, they managed to get another turn of consecutive priority. So Chris called with the captain, and they counter-called with the Spider Queen.
I'll roll. 1, 2, 3,
We're rolling it next time.
Just in case we weren't already worried enough, they had this weird base-sized measuring gizmo. Now, I get it, that genuinely looks really handy, and I kind of want one, but I swear to God it's mind games more than anything. They're just trying to psych us out. I reckon they think if they can make us feel inferior, then we'll be prone to making mistakes. Little do they know I've been coming across this technique my whole life from colleagues, friends, and loved ones, so I'm well prepared. With their move, they just re-engaged, getting those beautiful monstrous charge bonuses for the Spider Queen. To make matters worse, these little diddy spiders came and charged my trio of sniper archers. In the main bulk of the combats, we came in to support as best we possibly could, and in the Necromancer's ruins, Durin and a spearman jumped up onto this little ledge to try and challenge Bolg. We called a big old heroic combat this time with the dwarf captain. Also in his combat was Thingol, a Khazad guard, and a dwarf warrior. The Spider Queen also called a combat. I was feeling confident because we were due a roll-off.
Spider Queen goes first.
I charged, so 3 attacks.
The Spider Queen was fighting just a single dwarf, so odds were pretty good it was going to go off.
Oh! 5. Can't
No might. So on a 6, Chris, you take it. No pressure. That's big pressure.
4s, re-rolling everything. Dead.
Off their combat, both the bats and the Spider Queen tagged Rumil. Poor Rumil. Happily though, and predictably, Thingol and the captain handily dispatched their spider, and so their combat also went off. They used it to come and assist poor besieged Rumil, pairing off both the bats and the single spider. This at least meant Rumil would tie fight against the Spider Queen. It paid off, and I defeated the Spider Queen, but out of an abundance of caution, I had shielded, so I couldn't make strikes. Probably an error, given she's our target. In the rest of the combats, we lost a slew of elves, including critically 2 of the archers who were stopping these 2 spiders from basically running amok and presumably capturing their objective.
Play a turn.
That was brutal. We just lost everywhere. We've still got this guy. Oh no, that's Durin. Stab him in the back.
This was another critical priority, and they had run out of Palantirs.
We'll stop staring at 6. We'll stop
Turns out they'd not run out of 6s though.
That's a 3.
Our last hope was the Ring of Durin, which allows you to reroll 1 priority roll per game.
Yeah, we're going to re-roll it using Durin.
Okay, yeah, of course.
They called a heroic channel with the Necromancer. We didn't know what they were planning, but frankly, it scared the bejesus out of us. So we decided to call a move with Durin to try and turn off whatever spell he was going to try and churn out. They then responded to that with the Witch King's move, and so we were back to a roll-off. Could we win one?
Okay.
Yes, we could, which means we'll never find out what the Necromancer was actually planning. With the heroic done, it was time for the rest of the moves. The Spider Queen just bolted, and her spider scattered toward the 4 winds. Presumably they were heading for whatever terrain piece they'd nominated. We rushed as many models as we could onto the Necromancer's ruin to try and hold it before the game was out. Finally, the bats came and tagged Durin, which will stop him from ever being able to match the Necromancer's fight in combat. It was a reasonably bloodless fight phase. We lost 1 dwarf and 1 elf and killed nothing in return. As we went into the last turn, neither of us had wounded any heroes, and both of us appeared to be holding our objectives. So it looked like it was going to be a real nail-biter. That was until the Necromancer's magic. He decided to cast a channeled Chill Soul on Rumil using 6 will, leaving us all to guess who their target might be.
5 and a free 1. Chill Soul on Rummel. Cast on a 5.
Right, I'm going to resist with my free 1 and my only will. Come on, Rumil. I'm mighting up. He's already spent his fate. That's might.
There you go, cheeky might, and it's still a nail-biter. We managed to charge the Spider Queen with 2 elves with 3 supports with the pikes. We also took even more models into the ruins to get that on lockdown, and Durin recharged the Necromancer. I.e. charged again, not powered up. So the Witch King called a combat on the left. They were trying to kill my spearmen to get the bats into the combat with Durin. This is because Durin had struck up and was trying again to defeat the Necromancer.
So I'm going to shield.
I'm going to faint.
Yeah, fair play.
You're going to just attack.
Oh, I'm rolling one of your dice, sorry. I've got 4 anyway.
So Sauron's deadliest servant fluffed it. It's all down to the bat swarm.
Yes, it is. There we go, that's fine.
Where the Witch King of Angmar failed, the bat succeeded and killed the elf. This left the Nauglador to stand alone.
Bats, courage.
Ace. Oh,
Warhammer
that's
TV.
big. That is big. And then let's do the Spider Queen.
Yeah.
After all the pairing off, all I had in combat with the Spider Queen was a banner bearer, and that's it.
God, come on, little banner. He can re-roll for himself. He can't win it because my banner -1.
With that, there was now only 1 combat that can impact the outcome of the game, and that's Durin v the Necromancer. Durin struck to 10, but of course he's now halving his fight value because of those bloody bats. They got a 5 high, and they've got no might. If Chris can get a 6.
A single 6 and we can do it.
In striking, Chris managed to chip a wound off the Necromancer, but of course it can spend its will as fate. It cost 3 to do it, but it did manage to save the wound.
That's the game then.
Okay.
It is.
Shall we reveal our things then at the end of the game?
Let's do it.
Yes.
At the end of the game, their target was Rumil. We were trying to protect Rumil. Rumil remained unwounded. They were defending the Witch King. We were trying to kill the Spider Queen. Both of those remained unwounded. However, whilst we outnumbered them in our terrain feature, which got us 1 point, They completely held their terrain feature, which got them 3 points. That made for a final score of 3-1. Despite the fact we'd clearly been comprehensively outplayed, the game had been a lot of fun. We have to appreciate the incredible paintwork on those spiders, particularly the Spider Queen emerging from that giant web. That was not, however, the final game of the day. We also have the traditional Arena of Champions. This is a 7 Stone staple, and if you've seen last year's video, you'll know a bit about it. Each player chooses a hero model of less than 100 points, and they can spend every 5 points under 100 they are on additional might, will, and fate. So, Rumil, being 85 points, had 1 additional might, will, and fate. Chris's dwarf captain, being 60 points, had lots. He had lots of stuff. If you don't have any eligible heroes, the TOs will often let you play a warrior model and really just go to town on the might, will, and fate. So who else is in the ring? Well, in the top right corner, we have Farmer Maggot and his hounds, and a regular dwarf riding a goat. In the top left corner, from the 3 hunters, we have Gimli and Legolas. And from Nauglador in the bottom left-hand corner, we have the Keeper of the Dungeons, and weighing in at presumably £0, the Witch King of Angmar. So we rolled up a 4-way priority to get started. Chris and I would be going a respectable second. Early in the game, Nauglador went on to take on 2 of the 3 hunters. We then cagily moved up the wall, sort of toward the fighting. Farmer Maggot and the goats then also moved up toward the fight at the top of the board, and it looked like there was just going to be a big clump around where the 3 hunters had spawned. In Nauglador's turn, they committed, tying up both Legolas and Gimli with the Witch King and the Keeper of the Dungeons. This actually led to the first casualty of the game, the Dungeon Keeper out turn 2. Now, it was at this point that a joke in my mind turned into what I thought was quite a good idea.
Yes! I didn't want to cramp your style, you know.
Should we move back this way?
Yeah.
I love it, I'm content to camp out. See what happens.
Chris sensed this might not go down well.
Hey, you moving?
He was right to not want his fingerprints on it. I had no idea the utter fury that this was about to unleash.
What are they doing over there?
What have to do with me?
No,
I get mine first.
Brilliant.
Okay.
I will shoot them.
There you go. In one move, one literal move, I've managed to turn the entire table against us. Every player has signed onto an alliance that they will not fight each other until we are dead. They will live to regret this. Even Chris tried to jump ship.
Can I change teams?
Yeah.
Seeing what I'd done to my dear friend, I really tried to take the wrath of the crowd and spare him this horrible fate.
This was my responsibility.
Let the dwarf live.
Yeah, exactly. I accept my fate. I was acting like a coward, but Chris advised me not to do it. I don't think he should be punished for this.
It didn't work, and before we knew it, that dwarf on goat was on top of us, and Farmer Maggot and his hounds were bearing down behind him. So Rumil has just come off the back of rolling that 666 dual roll. He's assigned to Patreon Chris Murfitt. He's doing pretty good today, but I think this will be the real test. So first challenger was the Goat Rider, lost its combat with Rumil, and had to take one of his 5 fate to save it. A small win, but a good start.
I think you guys are being very petty about all this.
With their move, the 2 of the 3 hunters honoured their allegiance. They called off their attack on the Witch King and made a beeline straight for us. We started easy. The captain and Rumil ganged up on the Goat Rider and killed it. Then came something sterner, the Witch King. But not to worry, we killed him too. He'd of course regenerate, because apparently not getting into a fight turn 1 is an offence punishable by death, but bringing a regenerating wraith, that's totally fine. On his return, they improved their coordination and he joined up with Gimli and Maggot. In their respective turns, they started charging in again. Their alliance held frustratingly honourably. Even now I was trying to reason for our lives, pointing out that Legolas had done far worse than we had by just sitting back and shooting. They've committed a vastly worse crime than we ever did, I'll just point out. The argument came back that once they'd killed us, they'd deal with Legolas. That argument rang a little less resoundingly as a lowly dwarf captain just killed Gimli, and the pressure took its toll.
This is horseshit! What's going on? This is actual horse!
You need a ganker with 2 guys.
Yeah, you'll go.
None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you.
You're locked Get in here with me!
I would point out the dwarf captain has actually done an enormous amount of work so far, and unlike Rumil, it's not spent any might, will, or fate to do it. Yet here's Rumil stealing all the glory. Finally, we went on the offensive, ganging up on Farmer Maggot with both the dwarf and Rumil, and this itself caused consternation.
They brought that.
You can also hear the incredulity at our survival. Although it wasn't just them, I wasn't taking it with particularly good grace myself. Before we knew it, Legolas had joined the fray against the dwarf captain, and not long after that...
Oh, no.
I'm betting on this.
You're an idiot! You came for us first! We could be winning by now!
Yes, turn on each other like dogs! We all turned on you. Yeah, look how that worked out for you.
This gave Rumil the space to take on Farmer Maggot uninterrupted, and...
My hands are shaking! So you all go first?
Okay.
I need to lie down! Whip!
Farmer Maggot's hounds now broken. One ran away, the other charged Rumil bravely. The last of the menagerie standing. Or so we thought. That's it then. Just the resurrecting wraith to go. We've killed it once, we can kill it again. It charges the dwarf captain.
Go on, Chris.
He's got a mic. What do we need? 3? 2? 3 wounds.
3 wounds. I can't take the pressure.
I think this development actually broke me.
Look at my hand. Courage. 5 to 6. So we've got quick parry.
Kill the elf.
1 or 2. I can't. It won't help me.
So you guys try on. What's them to you? 6.
7.
So down to 3s. Oh. Damien, is it +4 to wound? Yes, obviously. Thank you. You need to pass both of your feet.
Come on.
You thought that was it, and it was over. But it actually wasn't. One of Farmer Maggot's dogs remained. First thing, the dog needed to pass a courage check.
Yes! Come on, dog!
Charge him.
This is a battle for the ages!
Unfortunately, heroic though the dog's efforts were, they weren't enough.
That's it, you can't survive, Dad.
So there we go. Now last year I recall ruffling a few feathers for bringing Durnhelm, in case anyone's not seen that video, because it's 2 models in 1, and everyone tried to kill me very quickly. The TOs even wrote cheeky on my entry in the betting sheet. What's more, my death was received like this. So it doesn't seem like I've got a very good knack for making friends in this competition. I wonder whether next year the tension will just become too much and one of us will die. Anyway, that had earned the Witch King a place in the final. I have to say, and I genuinely mean this without hyperbole, that was the most intense wargaming experience I have ever had. It was fantastic, and no one can doubt that Rumil and the Dwarf Captain performed exceptionally well. The Witch King's most superlative move might not have been anything on the tabletop, but in getting everyone else to do its dirty work for it. The menagerie and the 3 hunters fed themselves into a meat grinder so that the Witch King could get its way, which is pretty themey. So to Chris Murfitt, you should be proud of your Rumil. Stellar display. Definitely worthy of a prize, and so you'll be getting the last of my collector's Tolkien £2 coins. The winner of each pod's Arena of Champions went into the final with whatever might, will, fate and wounds they had remaining. And when that was done, we hit the pub. Whilst their 7 teams were nominated to be in the running for Best Army, considered to be the overall prize, as 7 stones. Chris and I took one nomination for which I was utterly delighted. We took one of the 7 Seeing Stones cards, which would give us special powers in tomorrow's games, which I'll cover then.
Thank you.
We We then did the quiz, and no offense to TOs watching, but often this is my least favourite part of regular tournament fare. But here there was the nonsense of the periodic table of MESBG knowledge. It was as maddening as it was fun. After this, it was time to keep the party going back at the hotel.
Going up. Doors opening.
Thank you so very much to my patrons for keeping us afloat in turbulent recent months. I hope you all received and are enjoying your copies of the SBG magazine, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the next video. For the moment, I leave you with this image of Chris Young enjoying his in style. So join the Patreon, join the Facebook group, links in the description, and thank you very much indeed for watching. So this is how I accidentally used permanent marker rather than board marker. So